I'm now introducing Marta Segura, who is the first person to be the city's chief heat officer. She leads the CEMO, or as what is referred to as the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office for Los Angeles. This is not her first job in the climate fight, though. She has worked in a number of positions over really her entire professional career. She is worked for the city planning office as a city planning commissioner for a number of years. She worked for the Center for Biological Diversity, which is right up our alley, as you can tell from the things that we're involved in. She also worked for the LA Neighborhood Land Trust. And at one point, she was a CD13 staff for Councilmember Garcetti, who later became Mayor Garcetti of Los Angeles. She's a wonderful guest for us because she's been on the political side of things, she's been on the advocacy side of things, and she's been on the front line of the climate fight for really her whole professional career. And so with that, I welcome Marta Segura. Chief Segura, are you here this evening? I see you shaking your head. Could
Yes,
you please spotlight Marta and me, please, Michael? And we will start our interview. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Marta.
of course. Thank you for inviting me, Charles, and pleasure to see all of you as well.
You know, I want to, first of all, just very quickly talk about, because a lot of people are here, are concerned about the fires, and I know that's an issue that's going to be on people's minds. Your office is about building long-term climate resiliency, not responding to like something like the fires after the fact. And so I just want to clarify for everybody that you're not the person who's out there in charge of clearing out the waste or anything like that, but
Mhm.
you're involved in trying to prevent the next kind of situation like that from happening, and also helping us be a resilient city from heat and other things like that. Could you talk a little bit just about what your current role is so that the people understand as we have the conversation?
Sure. As you mentioned, Charles, my office was initiated under the previous administration through lots of community engagement, pushing for a climate emergency mobilization office. So not only are we more about the long term and integrating the voices of community to build equitable climate policy and equitable climate resilience policy, but we want to make sure that the policies that we promote are here for the long haul. And there's a few examples of that I can provide. So I guess what I want to say with that is that transparency has never been more important. Strong community voices have never been more important. And I see one of our major roles is ensuring that the voices of community are heard in a way that the council members understand is a priority, not just for the community, but it's a priority for the CEMO office. And we're bringing it or lifting up those issues so that they are prioritized and that they're integrated in policymaking for the city of Los Angeles. And although we're not the lead first responders for, say, the wildfires, we do things like, we created a wildfire public health and safety toolkit. We're re-releasing it on Monday because obviously more resources are available and we want to make sure all those resources are reflected in our toolkit. And we did go to the Emergency Operations Center to obtain donations for the evacuees and for the response. So I was part of the EOC, and you'll hear about this and there'll be a press release about this, but we obtained a donation of 60,000 air purifiers that will be prioritized and distributed by the city. And we're getting nonprofits to help us distribute those. Obviously, that's a lot of pallets. So, but you'll be hearing about that very soon. So yes, it's really important for me to have this level of transparency and accuracy as well. And just one more thing on the wildfire, and I know you will get into that later, but we have what's called Unified LA. So there is a Unified LA website, and it'll tell you all of our primary departments that are responsible for the wildfire emergency response. And as we head into the recovery phase, what they'll be doing about the recovery. And then in addition to that, kind of just wanted to point out that maybe in a future question, Charles, I'll address how climate has literally changed because the Santa Ana winds, some of you will remember, were more in the summer. Now we're getting them in the winter, which makes it even more perilous because as you're seeing now with the rain, if we have these landslides happen right after the burning of the vegetation, the burning of the trees, then it becomes a much more difficult situation for the properties that have been impacted, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So just as a housekeeping thing for everybody, you're welcome to have conversation going on with what's going on in the chat. I'm not pulling questions out of the chat. We will have a Q&A for everybody at the end of my interview with her, which you're welcome to do those at that time. And just to let you know, I'm not going to be following the chat because I want to stay engaged with everything with our guest. Chief Segura, one of the things that I think is valuable for us here, and because we have climate advocates who are interested in this as a career, people who do this just as their passion, as a volunteer, but
Mhm.
a lot of times, since a climate major was not really something that was when you and I were young was
Right.
really something that was there, even though today that's starting to show up. Um, could you tell us a little bit about your path, career path? And in particular, one thing that I would love to hear is was there kind of a moment when you decided there was a lane where you could work as for the environment or for climate and kind of carve out the path for yourself because you've been doing this kind of work in one way or another for a long time.
Right. Well, I think I'll quickly start with my youth. I think maybe some of you can relate to this. We grew up in San Jose near the Guadalupe River, so nature was a big part of my life. And when then Governor Jerry Brown decided to spray us all with malathion and pesticides, that really changed my perspective on life. And I didn't understand why we were being sprayed by pesticides. And at the time, Cesar Chavez was really prevalent, particularly in Santa Clara County, San Jose, with the Great Boycott. So I started to put the pieces together at that moment that this was something that I wanted to learn about and empower myself on, because it felt like my community had lost all control, right? And I wanted to gain that control back by really understanding who makes the decisions, on behalf of my community, and why has my environment's changed so drastically. And also with the building of the Silicon Valley, right? We were displaced, our homes were demolished, we were moved out with eminent domain. And so really my entire world was shifted because of the political decisions being made without our involvement, without our engagement. So when I went to college, I was like, I still love nature, I still love science, but I found a degree in environmental studies at UC Santa Barbara. And that was like my track, my path. I knew that that was what I needed to do for the rest of my life when I realized that you could actually study that. And for those of you that don't remember, this was the 1980s. So particularly for myself, it was something that I had never heard about until I got to college. And then I realized, well, the thing that I was most worried about is how these political decisions were being made, but also how they impacted people's health. So I have a master's degree in environmental health sciences from the UCLA School of Public Health. And one thing led to another. And I've just been involved, as you said, in environmental work in one way or the other, with whether it's academia, public administration, community communities for a better environment, Center for Biological Diversity. But I think the common thread has been engaging communities, ensuring that they were involved, because I feel very strongly that they have always been extremely necessary to make the best policy decisions at the either local level, state level, or federal level. So that's one reason I really was excited to be here tonight, because I wanted to hear all of your voices and see what kinds of things we can integrate at this very critical moment and juncture where we have an unprecedented, crisis that has never been this disastrous for Los Angeles, right?
Yeah, yeah. And to your point, and yet, yes, I mean, I often lecture on, the crisis we have with biodiversity and talk about how our fire season has gone from 3 months in our lifetime, from 3 months to a year-round phenomenon, and the very kind of things you were talking about. When you started this work, and I know there were, if you go back to the 70s, really, there are people who first start ringing the bell on this, though they were largely ignored at the time.
Mhm.
And I'm sure there was some discussion of that when you were in school. Um, Can you talk about how things have changed while you have observed as somebody working in this area during this 40-year career that you're talking about here?
Great, yeah. Yeah, I had a professor whose name escapes me at the moment, but I remember he was a wind energy visionary. And he talked about how he was seen as crazy by most experts, by most individuals, but he kept on, doing that research and advocating for wind energy, and look at where we are now, right? And there were a lot of visionaries at that time who came out of the 60s and the 70s who were labeled as such. And in fact, the environmental studies department didn't really become a department until later. And now it's a much bigger, it's not even called environmental studies anymore at UC Santa Barbara, because it's received so much funding and a much higher status within the university. So people have, there's still climate deniers, unfortunately, but there are more of us now that really respect the alternative, what were once called alternative solutions, um, as the mainstream renewable energy initiatives that we all know need to be now funded. I don't know if that's what you were referring to in terms
Yeah.
of
I mean,
then
well, I
and
mean,
now. Mhm.
I- sure. I mean, there's no wrong answers here. We're all interested in what we're talking about. One of the things that I know your office is very focused on is the impact of heat on the city of Los Angeles,
Mhm.
and how, I remember when I first moved to the city in the early 90s. During the winter, the main talk was, is there going to be an emergency freeze or something? Is everybody going to lose their fruit on their fruit trees? I haven't heard anybody talk about that for 25 years now, and
Mm.
and now we're worried about people who don't have air conditioning in the summer and are in places where there's tremendous heat issues. And I've noticed that change just in the years I've lived in Los Angeles. And I know your office is working a lot to try to provide those solutions. Can you talk a little bit about what that means? Because I feel like the heat issue is something part of the climate discussion that sometimes doesn't get enough attention, and it actually is responsible for more human suffering than a lot of the issues that we talk about because of their direct impacts.
Right. Well, from a policy level, the state of California now has document an extreme heat program. And they just announced, well, they haven't officially announced, so I shouldn't say that, but they let us know that the city of LA will be receiving a planning grant to create the first West Coast heat action plan. And what that means really for the city of Los Angeles and eventually for other cities is this multi-departmental citywide effort to identify the strategies and the climate solutions that we may possibly already be working on, but that specifically address heat mitigation and heat adaptation and heat response. And then it crosses across many areas, from public safety and public health to climate adaptation and climate resilience. So it's not just one sector, it's multiple sectors, which makes it even more complex for uh, an office like mine within Public Works to leverage the kind of, I guess, power that we need in order to ensure that these various departments are working in synchrony and in alignment with many of our existing policies, but then are accelerating and prioritizing these heat mitigation and heat adaptation solutions, right? So in order to do that, the mayor now has a climate cabinet. We're leading the extreme heat working group for the mayor's climate cabinet, so that the various departments who do need to be engaged in these solutions understand that it's an initiative that's being supported not just by Public Works or CEMO, but it's a cross-departmental effort that's being supported for and advocated for by the mayor's office when we do release that heat action plan. And yeah, in terms of specific solutions, it goes any from, ensuring we have more cooling centers for the response, more public awareness, because public awareness is key, because the people don't really recognize that extreme heat is more frequent, more risky, and it's affecting all communities, but particularly the vulnerable communities with pre-existing health conditions, then people won't support the civic engagement that we need, and also the solutions that they need at home. So for example, if we take an apartment without air conditioning, without HVAC, without air purifiers, we need to change all that, right? That environment needs to change so that at least at home, those individuals are safe from extreme heat. And we get wildfires in the summer too. And God knows we have the 4th of July, so illegal fireworks as well impact the air pollution. And when you combine extreme heat, you're really exacerbating the air pollution, and exposure increases. And we already know from UCLA's research that we have more incidents of hospitalization, more deaths and mortality when we have an extreme heat alert and heat wave, but even more so when the ozone layers are high and we have higher particulate matter. So all of these cumulative impacts also affect how public health is impacted during a heat wave. So those are things that are of interest to me, not just because we want to prevent them, but because we need to learn how to evaluate them, measure them, and demonstrate that the work that we're doing is having an impact on reducing the public health
Yeah.
outcomes, right?
That's a good point, because it's the heat in and of itself is kind of a nebulous thing, and it's a difficult challenge to shape policy around that. To that end, I would be remiss if I don't bring up the fact that our organization, as a co-founding part of the coalition Southern California Stop Artificial Turf Task Force, has been very involved in the effort to try to get either a moratorium or a ban or a stop to all new installations, essentially, of artificial turf anywhere we can, especially in Los Angeles. Specifically, one of our main reasons is because of all commonly used building materials, and you and I have talked about this before, so you know it, of all common used building materials, artificial turf has the highest heat index coefficient. It causes the most increase in temperatures within our city of any possible material, more than concrete, more than asphalt. And it's one of the real drivers of that problem. And I know that as a result of city motion that was passed recently, that your office is going to be, has been tasked with preparing a report on this. And not to make you tip the hat on what necessarily the report's going to be, but could you talk a little bit about that role? And I know our membership here is very interested in seeing you as an ally in this work, and wanting to understand how we can help. And because it's my impression you're generally in agreement with us on this, but please don't let me put words in your mouth.
Sure. Well, I think we've already uploaded our report to the council on the council files.
Okay.
Basically, the next step would be for the council to provide direction to ensure that we have the proper analysis in order for them to take some sort of action. So don't quote me on this, but I think what they want to do next is to put pen to paper and ensure that there's an analysis of the feasibility, but also the health impacts, so that the council could take action like they're doing in Santa Clara County. I think that what they're doing in Santa Clara County is that they want to create a report that's created by an external consultant. So it's an independent voice from the city itself, so that the city can, that the county can take appropriate action to either eliminate artificial turf altogether, or have a transition plan to eliminate artificial turf, right?
Um, Forgive me if I'm being ignorant on something, but is that uploaded on the council file at the city clerk's online management record, or is it somewhere else?
It should be there, and if it's not, then I will check on that fact for you, because that was my impression. We completed a council file report, right?
Right.
And I believe we had it uploaded, but if it's not uploaded, my apologies, and I will make sure that it does get uploaded.
I'm putting the council file number in the chat just for people to check it. I don't have time to thoroughly go through and make sure it's not there, but I don't know of it being there, and I
Yeah.
don't think it's there. So,
Okay.
you know, just if anybody discovers it during the meeting, maybe type in the chat that it is there for sure, and we'll be happy to work
Yeah,
on it
that'd
with
be
you
good
on
to
the
know.
meeting.
That way I can see where the report is and make sure
Yeah,
that it
yeah,
gets
yeah.
uploaded. Great.
I know we're going to have
Awesome.
some more questions about that, so I don't want to go too much into it further. I want to ask
Hmm.
more about your career, being you know, somebody who's also been heavily involved in environmental justice as a, you know, person of color yourself. You've definitely faced, you know, certain challenges there, no question.
Hmm.
And I like the way you tied that into your upbringing up in San Jose. Could you
Hmm.
talk about how, at least from my perspective, I think there is a natural alliance between environmental justice and climate, and I think that they are partners. There is sometimes an effort in our politics, especially from moneyed interests, to try to drive a wedge between those two
Hmm.
interests. We see it a lot happening in solar right now, and we see it a lot in other alternative energies. Could
Yeah.
you talk about, first of all, if you agree with that assessment? And second of all, what we can do as advocates to try to build those bridges and make sure that environmental justice issues and climate issues are on the same side and working together toward common goals.
Great. Well, of course I agree with that, and this is probably preaching to the choir, because I know that Lisa and the NCSA, in my discussions with them, know that the communities that have historically been disinvested in, historically polluted, are where the refineries are and where the factories are, closer to the freeways. Those are termed sacrifice zones by those communities, and we're seeing a bit of that shift now that we have this disaster happening in areas like the Palisades. They're experiencing the sacrifice, the impact, the disaster that these communities have felt for years, right? So I think there's an opportunity to say that there is a common ground sense of urgency to address climate challenges and climate crises together now, because it is impacting wealthier communities much more often than before. So that's an opportunity. But the other thing is like when we're providing climate solutions at the city level or the state level, when we address these climate challenges where at the source of the pollution, which is in these communities, we get the most bang for the buck, don't we? Because we're reducing the pollution in these communities that have been sacrifice zones, right? And that reduces the pollution across the region, not just for that community. Same thing with urban forests and urban canopy. If we start to plant trees where there are none, where they've been historically neglected, we start to create an urban forest for everyone, because we really need this intricate urban forest across the entire region in order for it to act more like the lungs of the city. We can't just have it on one side of the city and not on the other side of the city. So, and I think that that kind of perspective applies to all climate solutions, right? So
Yep.
that there is this potential for unification and a broad-based movement building, because it's all one area affects all areas, right? And with this discussion about how the Santa Ana winds and wildfire season is now in every part of the year, I mean, that really does affect, maybe my neighborhood isn't on fire, but I'm feeling the air pollution from that neighborhood. I'm feeling the toxic, uh, potentially, contaminants in the water for however
Yeah.
long they're in the water.
And
So
ash in your
we
yard.
all
Yeah.
have the same body of contamination risk, so that it only makes sense for us to work together. Right.
Yeah, those are good points. And I couldn't be more thrilled that you brought up trees and canopy. It's something I work on all the time. And I want to take this opportunity to say that we always need to plant native trees when possible so that we're bringing biodiversity benefits and, to your point, getting the most bang for the buck and
Mhm.
bringing back songbirds and butterflies and all those to those disadvantaged communities as
That's right.
well, so that they're getting all the health benefits of that. We really need to be able to work on multiple levels in our thinking. And I think we can. And I'm really glad that we have people like you out there doing that work to help us do that, who get the bigger picture. I'm going to wrap up now with a final question to you, and then we'll open up to Q&A. So you guys
Mhm.
get ready with your questions. Um, I tend to end these interviews, I always end these interviews with a question asking if you could tell us when you have gone through a period where you're just not moving the needle, you're not making progress, you've been working on something that's really important and you understand the importance of it, and you're failing to get over that hurdle to accomplish what you need to do on climate. And I refer to these two as the banging your head against a concrete wall kind of moments. Um, and it feels like you just are wasting your time. We all have those days. What do you do personally to recharge your batteries, to find a reason to go on, to find a reason to keep fighting the good fight when that frustration that inevitably happens to everybody who works in these issues, when that comes into your life?
Yeah, I guess I turn to advocates, turn to communities across the globe, really, that may have even larger challenges, but they're not giving up, right? And when I see those examples of individuals who are really heroes and sheroes across the globe and in our own city, that inspires me and that keeps me moving forward. Because if they're not giving up, how can I give up in a much more privileged position in a much more privileged city? Where we do have resources, where we do have the capacity, and we have, wonderful citizens like you all working on these issues, just waiting for the opportunity to tip the scales in favor of these very necessary climate solutions. So then I look inward as well and say, what am I doing wrong? What can I do differently? What can I do better? Who should I connect with? Who could give me guidance, and who could inspire me, honestly. And I think that it's been the hope and the inspiration that I receive and the energy that I receive from others doing this work that keeps me moving forward and propels me forward. And I think that that's all that we can do. And sometimes we can't be too ambitious. And maybe don't take this the wrong way, but when we take smaller steps, we're leading ourselves to those bigger ambitions and those bigger steps that need to be taken. And we can't take those smaller steps for granted, because those smaller steps do lead to inspiring others to do what you're doing. And then it becomes a very collective effort and a very big solution at some point. So I've seen so many examples of that over the years. And even though I know right now is probably one of the hardest with this new administration that seems to be backpedaling on a lot of the progress, um, I see that too has hope, because if we can be super civically engaged like never before, that can make a big difference. So
That's a lovely and very insightful answer. Thank you very much. I want to really, really thank you for doing this with us here this evening. It's been a pleasure. And now we're going to open it up and see what our membership can take advantage of this opportunity to engage with you. Michael, if you could kill the spotlights, and we will start calling on people from the crowd. Andy, first and foremost with the hand as usual, Mr. Brown Noser. But that means you're up first, buddy. Go.
Sure. Thank you, Martha, for joining us. I really appreciate you joining us and your insight. I did have a question for you in your particular office. Is there anything that your office is doing or can do to encourage sustainable water infrastructure? Or if not, is there anything that Climate Reality and the people of Los Angeles can do to encourage sustainable water infrastructure so that we're mitigating the heat island effect and really, again, just making the city cooler and truly combating climate change, which is the mission of our organization?
great. Um, some of you may remember that LA Sanitation had this effort going called One Water LA. And they did have a community group meeting periodically to talk about sustainable water solutions for Los Angeles. I can check in with them to see what's happened with that effort. Because if it has come to a standstill, then maybe we can get it going again, so that, because they are the best department to address that issue for the city of LA. And in fact, have you all been to the Environmental Learning Center? It's on the coast of the Hyperion Water Treatment Facility. There's a beautiful learning center there. And I would encourage y'all you can have meetings there. There's an auditorium there. There's an interpretive center there, and you can have tours, and you could look at their membrane bioreactive pilot project that's supposed to encourage local water storage and local water recycling. And LADWP and LASAN are working really hard to ensure that we do have this local water storage and recycling system to depend a lot less on imported water. So I'd love to get you that information. Maybe we can get a presentation for you all. Maybe we can even make it at the Environmental Learning Center with both DWP and LA Sanitation, and our office could help facilitate that.
Okay, I'm just gonna say we're in, so
Yeah.
we'll do that.
Let's
We're
do
happy
it.
to do that.
All
Let's
right.
do
Okay.
Thank you for your insight and answer.
Of course.
Andreas, you're up.
Hi, I'm sorry I can't turn on my video because the lighting is really bad. I actually have two questions, if I may. One is the Venice Arbor Committee has asked the Venice Neighborhood Council. We've discussed sort of the canopy in the Palisades and Brentwood and the potential loss of it. And we've asked the Venice Neighborhood Council to write a letter to both Tracy Park and the mayor to alert them to the fact that a lot of the trees in that area that may appear dead are probably just charred, and that we don't want to lose them in the course of the debris clear up. And I was wondering how you can help.
Yeah. Well, I
Second-
mean, yeah, I think you definitely, I report to the Deputy Mayor Sutley, the Mayor's Office of Energy and Sustainability. So if you provide the letter, I can make sure the Deputy Mayor gets it, and that she provides it to the other appropriate deputy mayors, because it's a combination of deputy mayors that's working on the recovery. But I understand your concern of the potential of eliminating vegetation that may look, impacted or dead, but isn't, and that will require the appropriate types of inspection so that that vegetation continues to thrive. With regards to Tracy Park, you guys probably have better access than I do to Councilmember Park.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if there's anything that I could do to provide it to her deputies, I'd be happy to provide it to her deputies and her policy chief. So we could do that as well, right?
Thank
And
you.
or you can speak about it at the Climate Emergency Mobilization Commission at our next meeting. And I could probably identify a few. You can speak about it at Public Works as well. And I can probably identify a couple of different places for your voices to be heard around this issue that would be strategically important, right?
That would be wonderful.
Of course.
Second question, unrelated, but somewhat related, and that had to do, I attended your wonderful session at the Neighborhood Council Congress in April or May, I believe, and learned that the libraries play an important role in sort of heat mitigation. That made me wonder why the libraries close to the Palisades fire, and I'm speaking of, for example, the Abbot Kinney Library in Venice was closed post-fire for more than a week, I believe, and they could have, in my opinion, provided shelter from the air quality that we faced in that area. So I was just wondering about that situation.
I'm not sure why that a library closed. Usually we get notifications of those closures. I didn't get notification of that particular closure. Like, for example, we know San Pedro's closed for repairs, and They're installing a new HVAC system in the San Pedro
Right.
Library. But
I think Mar Vista is closed for
Mar-
repairs as well
oh,
at
okay,
the moment, but Venice closed. I don't know what other libraries in the area closed.
right.
Um,
I could definitely find out for you, but another way to find out is just by calling LAPL as well and find out if it's closed for repairs or if it's closed for other, because of lack of that. Here's the other thing too, a lot of our staff were actually part of the neighborhoods that were evacuated, right? And it's quite possible that a few librarians might have been impacted by the fires themselves. So, but it's a good question, and I definitely have to get back to you on that.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Of course.
And just to make things simple, Andres, if Chief Segura wants to get back to me directly on any of these things to follow up, I'd be happy to distribute it so you don't have to worry about connecting to
Great.
anybody individually. Just if that's something that's available to everybody. So,
Thank
Okay,
you.
that's great.
Lisa, you're up.
I'm Lisa with the LA Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance, and I can tell you, Andreas, I've been very involved in the trees discussion because we have a trees committee that Charles is the liaison to, and the Venice Neighborhood Council has been very involved with since they're adjacent to Palisades or quasi-adjacent to the Palisades, and the short answer is they've been very supportive, and we have been very, what am I trying to say? We already have a lot of answers to how to support the trees that the Venice Neighborhood Council has been supportive of. So I can work with you offline, and Charles can work with you. I don't know if Charles, you've been on those emails, but you haven't, so we can work with you offline on that because we already have a lot of answers to your questions. But my question to you, Marta, or one of my many questions to you, Marta, I should say, is I have been really miserable the last couple of weeks for countless reasons. But I think one of the big ones is that I kind of thought this was maybe the fires were maybe the moment to help people connect the dots between the climate crisis and climate emergencies, which is part of the name of your office. And I think this was like an opportunity, crises and opportunities. And this is such a missed opportunity that was completely missed by the city's leadership. I don't think I've heard one city leader, except for LADWP, use the term climate crisis. It didn't come from the mayor, it didn't come from a city council member that I've heard of, and it hasn't come from your office. And I think that's it just makes me sick to my stomach.
Right.
And I'd love to hear your comments on that. And you folks are the Climate Emergency Office, and this is a climate emergency. And this was, the moment this was your moment. And
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Yeah, I understand. Here's the thing. When I say that this is the moment for accuracy and transparency and it's a crisis, I think that the entire city is trying to ensure that there isn't misinformation and there aren't just folks talking emotionally about the crisis, but people are getting the information that they need. In order to do that, the mayor's office created Unified Los Angeles, which means that all of our communications are currently going through the Emergency Operations Center. And so they're focusing, the city is focusing their communications on emergency operations and eventually recovery. But I understand fully what your frustration is. I have been getting requests from the media to speak on this. I would have loved to speak on this, but we have this unified LA voice at the moment that so we're relying really on our key emergency team, and principally the mayor, to get the voice out there for the city. And that is just basically how this mayor, you know, wants us to cooperate to ensure that people get the most accurate information possible with regards to the emergency. So I hope that helps a little bit. We will be having a Climate Equity LA series. I want to talk about climate resilience as it relates to wildfires, as it relates to extreme heat, as it relates to flooding, as it relates to other climate hazards that will be also discussed in our climate vulnerability assessment, which is going to be released in March. So we will have more conversations about this. And I do have private conversations with city leaders about how this is the moment for climate resilience, for us to invest now more than ever on this issue. So hopefully that response makes sense to everybody here, and I'd be happy to
Let me
expand
ask
on
you
that.
a question. Maybe you can shed some light on this. Because I have not spoken, I've spoken to a couple of city council offices, but not directly about this. Do you happen to know if they are also kind of under the same?
No, I don't think
I
so.
want to answer this, huh?
I don't think the council offices have to, we,
Okay.
you know,
They're not under the same constraints.
No.
Okay.
no,
Okay.
no, they're your elected leaders. They're
That's
independent of the mayor's office.
Okay.
And that's really wonderful, so that they can speak about this.
I
Yeah.
want to, I'm sensing some subtext in your answer, and I appreciate the political position you're in, Chief Segura. I want to just throw out there that we can talk about climate anytime we want. And if you need an advocate to raise the flag on something, we want to be that advocate in cooperation, whether it's a upfront or a back channel. I want you to know that that's available to you, and you don't have to respond to it in any way.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on now to Michael with his question.
Thanks. Yeah, my name is Michael. I'm the chair of the Green Building Committee for LA Climate Reality. And I know that your office has thought a lot about building decarbonization in the city. And I wanted to ask about the mayor's directive in the areas that were impacted by the fires. Part of kind of the directive was to set aside building electrification rules for those areas when they're rebuilding. And it just seems counterproductive, because we know that natural gas is a fossil fuel that contributes to climate change. It's also very flammable and dangerous, you know, in a fire situation. And it's actually cheaper to build a new building without gas, and probably faster as well, because you don't have to do that work of putting in the gas systems. So I guess I just wanted to see, you know, what's happening with, you know, building decarbonization, and kind of any, you know, reaction to or explanation for why that was included.
Yeah. Well, we have a decarbonization policy for new buildings. So this is kind of maybe it's in between from the mayor's perspective, because these were existing buildings, but we have not created a policy for existing buildings yet. I'd like to say that I wholeheartely agree with you that there have been several studies that say that rebuilding or building something new with the electrification without gas is cheaper or a wash, right? Like it's either less expensive or neutral.
Right.
So I think it would be very helpful again for these voices to emerge, so that she hears it loud and clear, and it's not just coming from her her desire to get people back in their homes and get them back in their homes quickly. The Department of Building and Safety actually did a study with Borough Happold that said just that, right? That buildings are less expensive when you just do electrification versus include gas. So the Department of Building and Safety does know this. So I think we just need to elevate those voices before the rebuilding begins, while these, recovery phases getting started, so that the talking points, can be informed by this knowledge, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a really interesting article recently that, to one of the comments in the chat, talked about the co-benefits of electrifying the entire neighborhood and removing the gas infrastructure and undergrounding the electric wires when you're rebuilding such a large area all at once,
Yeah.
so.
Great. No, I've seen some of those, and I think that we need to share that also with, not just with the mayor's office, but with the council members, with the CLA, right? To ensure that everybody across the board is informed. And that is one of my roles. So if you have articles that you could give to Charles, that he could give to me, and I could inform the deputy mayors about this and the Environmental Operations Center about this, I'd be more than happy to do so, and remind the Department of Building and Safety about this information, even though they already have it. I'd be happy
Great,
to
thank
do
you.
that. Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to understand that all of us have a role that we're playing in this work, and some people have to do more political balancing than others. But that doesn't mean that we can't keep pushing as much as we want from our end, and that we're helping the people in those political positions as long as we're respectful and doing that pushing. I have a couple more questions out there, but the Q&A, it typically ends now. So I want to create one more opportunity if anybody hasn't asked a question tonight, and this is your chance to raise a hand. All right, so I think we're going to wrap it up because we only have so much time, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I appreciate, Lisa and Andreas, that you have your hands up, but we are the Q&A officially ends at 1/4 after, so we're going to wrap this up. And I just want to say, Chief Segura, thank you so much for being here this evening. We truly appreciate what you're doing and the work that you're doing. And I know some of the questions were pushing you a little bit, and that's our job too. So I appreciate that you have an appreciation for that.
Oh, completely. And I feel, you guys are key, you're critical, you're brilliant. You have, advanced information on all of these issues. And just like Charles was saying, we are symbiotic. I need you, and I need you to raise your voices. And when you give me information and I can relay, hey, the folks from the Climate Reality Project or the Neighborhood Council or X gave me this information and it's accurate. Look at it. Let's talk about this. I think that this is what we should be doing. I'm an internal advocate, if you will,
Sure.
and I have that possibility to speak with these different entities, and I will definitely be doing that.
One of the nice things about our chapter, our organization, is that we have a great number of experts in a great number of fields, and we're fairly nimble. So if there's something that you need and you need it in a fairly short order, we are able to get a letter out or get a position on something. And so please understand that's a two-way street, and we welcome your engagement through whatever channels necessary to support the issues we all care about.
Thank you so much.
You bet.